English translation, 906th contact, Saturday, 15 February, 2025, 003 hours.
Greetings, my friend. It is early morning again. Edouard, but I feel compelled to inform you of what we have been able to find out regarding. We have all endeavored, in addition to our duties, to find out what is really fact and reality, and all this is unfortunately very unpleasant. So,
Excuse me, first of all, greetings everyone. It is early in the day once again, but it is still fine with me that you have come here because...
That is indeed the case, and we have all endeavored to fathom everything back to that time when the whole of what we had to discern in the process was unfortunately not pleasant and revealed frightening things to us regarding. But I would also like to greet you and thank you for your welcome.
With which I concur. Greetings, Edward.
Of course, that also applies equally to me.
Thank you, but sit down. Standing is uncomfortable. You, Quetzal, why do you not find a chair? You know where you can get one. You, Karika, can sit on the sofa as you can also Tijoru or Arar, and someone can sit on the chair. Unfortunately, it is a bit cramped here, as my workroom is not exactly large, but there have been more people here together and it has always been enough. So have a seat. And you, Quetzal, can you bring the chair here, please?
yes, I will need another chair.
All right then, and yes, good, sit down, Quetzal. Go on, it is a bit cramped as usual, but it is fine. So what is there to report?
What we have been able to fathom is really very unpleasant, and that is we have...
Already Bermunda, Florina and Injana have endeavored to do so, and have variously made similar observations. Unfortunately, we four have now been able to ascertain in this regard that there is no possibility of any effort regarding.
We have...
It is incomprehensible to all of us that but as we have been able to realize most accurately and clearly profoundly that there is no that any.
There!
It is probably better if we discuss the whole thing in such a way that I do not have to call each of us by name individually and then dot the I's and cross the T's for everything said when Quetzal dictates everything to me later. Because for the time being I cannot recall anything from conversations and also cannot write anything down.
What you say, that is the way it should be.
It is probably correct for me to simply point out everything we still have to talk about regarding. If you, Quetzal, then dictate everything to me again. I do not think you also have to dictate to me what we talk about regarding.
I think that is correct.
Good, so be it then.
Then we can move on to other things.
Then the three of us can get back to our duties, because everything that needed to be said has been mentioned.
Of course, everything that needed to be said has obviously been discussed and said. Unfortunately, as you clearly state, nothing can be done about it. There is probably no point in me, or what do you think?
I suppose it will.
I think it would be a labor of love in vain, for it is not to be expected that.
It will be pointless to try but let us not talk about it any further now. Goodbye, Edward.
I will second that. Goodbye, Edward.
Goodbye then.
Okay, farewell. I was very happy to see you again, and I also want to thank you, also you, Quetzal, for making such an effort. So see you again, which I am always ready to do. Take care together, and they are already gone. But you, Quetzal, I would like to ask you how I should assess the whole thing and what.
Unfortunately, we cannot rule out a fear, but we will all also be paying attention over the next few days.
Of course I know that, and I cannot also imagine it any other way because... Sure, let us talk about something else now. Though, because as you said a long time ago, those things are going to happen in the near future that the neo-Nazi hangers-on, who do not even know that, is what they are in their mindless and irresponsible, confused, bogus thinking, are going to provoke all the more all the coming evils through their own idiocy. As you said a few weeks ago, Trump will once again take the helm in the USA, and this time he will not only turn America upside down, but the whole world in its unreality and madness. He will especially shock the neo-Nazis of the German government and the EU dictatorship because he will not favor those who have done the US President Biden's bidding and supplied weapons and money to the warmonger Zelensky, enriching himself quite generously, as Bermuda noted. Well, you said that Trump is no longer in his right mind, but somehow out of his mind, so he can no longer organize his thoughts clearly and logically, and cannot really order everything as it should be correct. He really does feel and behave like an untouchable emperor, as you described him. And it will also happen with the EU dictatorship in Germany. As you said, that they will probably not be involved, just as Zelensky or any other representative of Ukraine will not be involved, as you explained. And as Bermuda said a good 3 months ago. This is when there will be negotiations between Russia and the USA in the near future regarding peace efforts or peace negotiations, etc. Zelensky and Ukraine should therefore not be included, nor should the entire EU dictatorship in Germany, but whether this will really be the case remains to be seen. But for the time being, this requirement will be met, because these two in particular did not behave neutrally during the Ukraine war, and also continue to not behave neutrally. Germany should be robbed because it supplied weapons to Zelensky, who was a traitor to his own people anyway and sent his murderous organization, the military, into the war, where nothing but murder is committed. Putin also acts in the same way, but the difference between him and Zelensky is that the latter is not a warmonger. But seen correctly, every military army is nothing other than an unscrupulous organization of murderers, whereby America in particular is making a name for itself with its army of murderers, which is interfering all over the world in a hegemonic mania and in a world policing behavior. After all, America is to blame for the war in Ukraine because US President Biden provoked Putin for so long for the sake of turning Russia into a pig that Putin started the war. This is because, contrary to America's promise in the 1990s, NATO established itself in the former Eastern Bloc countries, and now the senile US President Biden wanted to complete this in such a way that Ukraine would also ultimately become a NATO country. In other words, contrary to America's promise that no NATO expansion would take place from Germany. However, this promise was broken by America shortly afterwards, and the expansion of NATO into the former Eastern Bloc countries began, which Putin had every right not to allow. However, Biden stubbornly insisted that Putin started the war in Ukraine in order to push through and hoping that America would still keep its promise. But this did not happen, and the war has now been going on for 3 years. So what to think of America, and what a promise from America means for those in power, is only as much as stinking dirt on their shoes, which is trampled all over the world, soiling and stinking and hegemonizing, and can no longer be wiped away. This is because the low intelligence of all states and the majority of all peoples allow this indifferently, either out of blind and lowly intelligent America friendliness, or out of America fear, and therefore cowardice.
That is correct. Bermuda has already said so several times, and I have also mentioned several times in the same sense, for a breach of a promise must never take place. Because as a result of a breach of promise, not only is all trust destroyed, but it also leads inevitably to enmity and all the time to inextinguishable mistrust. However, as far as the peace negotiations between Russia and America are concerned, the European Union dictatorship in particular, and therefore all the states belonging to it, will very probably be excluded if the peace talks between America and Russia actually take place within the planned framework. This will therefore also affect Germany if what has been planned so far is effective.
Correct, and in this regard we have the saying, once a liar is told, he is not believed, even if he speaks the truth once. Bermuda said, with regard to the wrong actions of the government in Germany, that this is the fault of that part of the German government which is neo-Nazi in its mindset, which in its low intelligence or in its non-thinking, which only allows it to think and behave accordingly, does not even know that it is effectively neo-Nazi in its thoughts and actions. This is also the reason why they have irresponsibly supplied weapons and money to Ukraine and the warmongering Zelensky according to the will of the U.S. ex-President Biden, and also continue to do so. This is contrary to the admonitions of those who reject this and are against it, such as the AfD and BSW parties, which do not have their hay on the same stage because the BSW calls the AfD neo-Nazis while the BSW is labeled communists. This, although I do not know what else they have up their sleeve, but it is the case that both are pulling in the same direction, so to speak, and want neither weapons nor money to be moved and delivered to Zelensky in Ukraine, whereby on the contrary, if weapons are delivered, etc., the war will continue. But this makes all those who supply arms and give money, etc., to Zelensky murderers, co-responsible for destruction, suffering, and misery. And regarding Zelensky, Bermunda said that he was a willing collaborator of former President Biden, and that he had practically developed the passion of a warmonger and warmonger without equal. Bermunda also stated that he therefore does not want peace, but is pushing and maintaining the Ukraine war with various states through arms begging and very malicious hostile speeches and hostile lies against Russia, and will not let it come to an end. Moreover, according to this fact, he is effectively shaken by fear because he is afraid that he will have to give up his war fanaticism, his lust for war, and his might if a peace agreement is reached between Russia and the USA. And if I want to say something again about the AfD and BSW parties, it is the following. Alice Weidel as president of the AfD party, as well as Sarah Wagenknecht as founder of the BSW party, are, so to speak, on the political sidelines with their non-war stances and not supplying weapons to Zelensky. It is true that these parties are at loggerheads, although various of their aspirations are very similar in nature, especially with regard to dealing with Russia, migration, and peace in Ukraine, as well as peace and freedom in general. Of course, there are diverse views on this and that, but with a little understanding and reason, and thus with a little tolerance and without hostility, rejection and envy, condemnation, disapproval, and boycott without hatred, a real consensus can be found. Not everyone has to be of the same opinion as their neighbor. And not everyone has to be of the same opinion as their neighbor, and this is a form of freedom for human beings, which everyone should be able to exercise. Parties and their members can also exist side by side and get along without hostility, spite, and difficulties, and can also be friendly, get along and harmonize with each other in honor, dignity, decency, and correctness, and thus maintain really good interpersonal relationships. This is also the case when fundamentally different views, educational backgrounds, opinions, wealth, religious beliefs, and notable social differences, etc. prevail. It is not these status values that make human beings human because fundamentally every human being is a human being, no more and no less. What is important, however, is his attitude and his behavior, because this alone determines, even if he is fundamentally a human being, whether he is an effectively righteous and also truly full and true human being in humanity. And cherishing and cultivating this attitude earned me the honor of being a welcome guest of various renowned high-ranking rulers, etc., in various countries throughout my life, where I was able to get to know them. There was no hypocrisy, only honesty, which is something that is usually lacking in those who sit in governments today and pretend to be great, clever, smart and wise, but who are in reality none of these things, but are deceitful, lying, acting, and cheating, putting themselves in the foreground and thinking they are important, although they are failures all along the line. So as presidents of states, foreign policy leaders, or others who function as political pundits.
Indeed, what you say. That is really so. Also what you said regarding Zelensky, because he is advancing and perpetuating the war through his hostile speeches against Russia and his, as you say exactly, arms begging. As we have analyzed in detail, since his appointment as leader of Ukraine, he has indulged in the absolute mindset of a dictatorial ruler, meaning that he runs everything as a dictator, and in this wise deceives all those human beings who are addicted to non-thinking and thus to low intelligence and ignorance. As a result, these state leaders, who are fundamentally categorized as incompetent, are at the mercy of all the deceitful lies and deceptions of the dictator Zelensky. In their inability to think or in their low intelligence, the state leaders are unable to recognize what Zelensky is trying to achieve through his well-thought-out and calculating lies, as well as through his hateful, deceptive speeches and actions of demanding weapons and finances, but also for NATO membership and the deployment of military forces from foreign countries, which he wants to banish from the country once he has won. He pursues these demands in a far-reaching and deceitful manner, and hopes that various state leaders, their followers and parts of the non-thinking but believing population will be lowly intelligent or non-thinking enough to agree to his demands, and that everything will work in his favor for his dictatorial power. Because all those who are lowly intelligent or non-thinking are lulled by him and are therefore unable to see through his real dictatorial machinations. In the process, those leaders of the various states fall prey to their own low intelligence, who quite obviously, in their arrogance and incompetence, do not recognize Zelensky's web of lies, and therefore do not realize in any wise that this man is ruled by practically unquenchable war fanaticism.
Not only does it seem that way, it actually is. But let us name the three who currently have the representation of Bermunda, Enjana, and Florina.
That is correct. They are Tijoru equals the instructor, 432 years old Arar equals the calm one, 398 years old Karika equals the pretty one, 261 years old. I also want to tell you that Ptah has informed you that he will soon be back here, because he will be back in a few days and will also visit you again. The reason for the unexpected delay that occurred when he wanted to come back has been sorted out.
That is gratifying. But these things happen, something unexpectedly comes up in what was planned and therefore cannot be kept.
That is what happens sometimes. But now I have to explain that the committee is deciding what to do about a significant time shift for the core group's main meeting on the first weekend, and possibly the third weekend. We would also like to hear the views of the core group members. And with regard to your question to the committee, the following is explained. If there are 2 public holidays to be swapped, whose public holiday services want to be swapped, then a swap or change of the Sunday service of the rite can be given. Only a change should not be allowed between a public holiday service and a normal Sunday service, because that would be illogical. But now, Edward, I am being called, as you can see here. So I have to go.
That is good. Our conversations do not have to last hours every time.
Goodbye then, dear friend.
Then so be it. Goodbye, Quetzal, my friend. Interesting letters sent on 15th and 17th February excerpts from 2 emails regarding applied creation energy teaching.
15.2025. I will, of course, continue to do my best, work on the basics, values and virtues, and constantly develop myself further. If one day the opportunity arises to find the correct life partner, I will incorporate and implement all these values and virtues into the life partnership to the best of my understanding, ability, and good. As for the occasional inner loneliness, I will do my best to find my inner home, consciously build it up, and finally dissolve it. My life used to also be characterized by chaos, especially before 2020. But from the beginning of 2020, I was able to gradually bring more harmony and order into it by effectively taking responsibility for myself. Creation energy teaching was a tremendously valuable support in this process, helping me to take the correct path in life through self-awareness, self-responsibility, self-effort, insight, and relentless work on myself, which I have consistently followed to this day. Since my earliest childhood memories, I have never felt a real sense of belonging, neither in my family nor among relatives, friends, or colleagues. This only changed when I consciously decided to come out of my years of seclusion and become a passive group member of FIGU in November 2022. This feeling of belonging intensified again when I started actively working at the center on Saturdays in May 2023, It was there that I experienced for the first time how human beings interact with each other on a truly equal footing, an experience I had never had outside of Figu. Figu. Billy and everyone else at the center gave me a strong sense of belonging because you treat every human being with true equality and exemplify creation energy teaching in an exemplary manner. I will keep my hand even more consciously on the steering wheel of my ship of life in order to continue my course through self-responsibility and consistent self-effort, and to reach my goal.
17.2 2025. Over the last few days, I have thought about this intensively during my evening walks and will work on myself even more purposefully and consistently. I will continue to use creation energy teaching as a valuable tool to finally free myself from inner loneliness and create my inner home. In addition, I will of course continue to develop myself further so that, should I find a potential life partner, I can also share these valuable fruits with her and build a fulfilling life partnership together. In the past, I often had the feeling that I was born at the wrong time, in the wrong culture, family, and environment. But today, I know with certainty that everything is exactly as it should be, that I was born in the correct place at the correct time. I became more and more aware of this as my consciousness developed, especially through Billy's teachings and the Figu. Above all, I fully realized that it is no mere coincidence, but a coincidence based on logical causes to live in the immediate vicinity of Billy and the Figu in my current life. I recognize the valuable chance and development opportunity that this offers me in my current life, and know that I should make the best possible use of it. My seal is to learn as much as possible in order to purposefully advance my evolution of consciousness in this life, so that my successor personality can also benefit from these fruits and hopefully find Figu and creation energy teaching as early as possible. Just as it was once granted to me by a lucky coincidence as a young human being in September 2012.
Sprinkles from the Correspondence, 10, from Bernadette Brand.
For people who live alone and are looking for a partner, the question often arises as to when, where and how they are most likely to meet the human being they hope will be by their side for the rest of their lives and with whom they can build a fulfilling and happy relationship. Creation energy teaching provides certain calculation bases to answer the question of when, which can be used as an aid but are not mandatory in any way. However, some explanations are necessary, which can be found in the following answer to the first question. Another issue that concerns many people is the question of a certain inner loneliness that many human beings feel and do not know how to deal with. Creation energy teaching can also provide valuable help here, allowing human beings who are plagued by such feelings to gradually work their way out of the depths, which requires self-recognition and conscious self-control. As usual, I shorten long-winded questions, or those that could allow conclusions to be drawn about the person asking them, and endeavor to make the questions as clear as possible. The anonymity of the interviewee should be preserved under all circumstances, which is very important to me. Apart from Billy and myself, nobody should know who is asking what, unless it is absolutely necessary to mention a name, for example when correcting false claims in articles. Poll question. I have intensively studied the calculations from the 154th contact report between Billy and Quetzal on the basic values and the determination of the correct life partner. According to Quetzal, the Earth's population on December 4, 1981 at 23:01 hours was 4.3 billion human beings. The calculation states that the basic value number increases by 2 points, or 2 years, for every increase of 500 million human beings. Starting point: 4.3 billion human beings, December 4, 1981. Population increase 9.54 billion. 4.3 billion equals 5.24 billion. December 31st, 2024. Steps of 500 million human beings each increase by 2025. 5.24 billion divided by 0.5 billion equals 10.48 steps. The basic value increases by 2 years per step. 500 million human beings. 10.48 times 2 equals 20.96 years, rounded 21 years. This means that, according to this calculation, my effective age of determination shifts forward by 21. Now the question arises, are the destiny swinging waves already taking effect now, so that the correct life partner can already enter my life? Or will this only happen when I reach the effective age of destiny? I ask myself this because in the last few years, since I had been living alone, I have not met a woman with whom I could have imagined a real, valuable life partnership. I have always communicated openly with my fellow human beings from all kinds of countries and cultures, pursued my hobbies such as hiking in nature and other things with reason, and met a wide variety of human beings in the process. Women my age or younger, on the other hand, are very often distant or even very cool, which also led me to realize that many of them, like many men, are playthings of modern superficialities, fashion trends, and short-lived false ideals. The broad mass of human beings are egregiously similar in their superficiality and believability. Answer: it should be noted in advance that the calculations relating to partnership arrangements, as described in creation energy teaching, have no compelling influence on human beings. It is therefore not the case, as is misunderstood by many human beings, that the correct life partner must or will enter life at a certain point in time. The calculation bases are based on the assumption that the human being who is concerned with them, or who wants to know the age at which he or she will meet his or her life partner on the basis of the calculations, has developed smoothly, so to speak. This means that he has realized himself in every relationship, not in the sense commonly associated with it, namely, that he has achieved everything in the material and professional sphere that corresponds to his wishes, but in the sense that he has developed himself to such an extent that he is able to enter into a sustainable relationship and build a life partnership, provided that this is within his aspirations. This includes not only rectifying their own profound mistakes, but also developing understanding, empathy, consideration, the ability to listen, recognizing the needs of their partner, and responding to them, as well as tolerance, loving devotion, and, last but not least, the ability to form a genuine partnership, which means supporting the other person within an appropriate framework, being helpful in their efforts, and always showing them respect. The human being only becomes capable of a fulfilling and loving partnership once they have developed these foundations within themselves. Such developments take a certain amount of time, which also depends on the state of the environment and how it reacts and develops itself. This is where overpopulation comes into play as an aggravating and sometimes disabling factor, because due to its influences, both in the area of social proximity and ever closer coexistence, as well as in the area of influences that arise due to the way of thinking and orientation and the beliefs of the entire mass of humanity, which are becoming increasingly noticeable as massive disruptive factors, the desired self-development or self-realization is considerably delayed. This then leads to the calculable delays in partnership determination, although these calculations are individual and are controlled and determined by human beings through their own endeavors. With the best efforts and a serious approach to oneself, these calculations can be overridden, so to speak, and the calculable delays can be minimized. But if the efforts are not so good, it is possible that human beings will not even be able to choose a life partner for themselves, although they long for one, because they do not achieve or implement the necessary requirements. These developments are of course not only relevant for the human being who is endeavoring to look for a life partner with whom they can build a good and fulfilling relationship, but also for the human being who is potentially suitable as a partner. If one of the two fails in their own work and in their own development, then it can come to the point that a real partner can never be found throughout a lifetime, or if a partner is found, then a partner is found who is not completely right. Which means that more or less major problems occur again and again at shorter or longer intervals, which can strain the relationship and possibly even make it impossible or destroy it. Like everything in creation energy teaching, nothing is compulsory or predetermined in the sense that human beings understand it due to the wrong influences of upbringing, faith, and society, but everything is based on self-awareness, self-responsibility, self-effort, insight, and constant and unrelenting work on oneself. Creation energy teaching is nothing more than a tool for human beings that shows them which path they can take and in which direction they should direct their steps. Everything else is left to him and his own initiative. Whether human beings consult the recipe book of life, the creation energy teaching, and adopt its counseling and instructions and try to put them into practice is entirely up to them. He can work up his soup of life to a culinary highlight or spoil it to such an extent that it becomes absolutely inedible. Whatever he also does is left solely to his own decision and his own wisdom, and nothing, absolutely nothing, forces him in any wise to realize his own interests or simply to disregard them. The human being is and remains a free and independent being who is fully responsible for himself and his own development at all times, and in every respect. From this realistic point of view, human beings are always in control of when they find their life partner and can build a satisfying and fulfilling partnership with him or her. Regardless of age, social status, or calculations, which are nothing more than approximate aids, because everything depends on their own efforts and successes. Whether a human being seeks a life partner at all or prefers to take his or her life into his or her own hands and shape it alone, is entirely dependent on him or herself, his or her needs and desires, and says nothing at all about his or her efforts regarding self and self-development.
Question. An inner loneliness has accompanied me since my early childhood, as I was somehow always aware of myself and never felt understood or accepted by those around me. Today I am indifferent to this, but occasionally this loneliness spreads within me, which I quickly become aware of, and just as quickly disappears again when I meditatively concentrate on other beautiful thoughts or go for a walk. In such moments, I tell myself that nothing is forever, and that the correct encounters will surely come in due time.
Answer. There is also a lot to explain about inner loneliness, because this inner loneliness is an issue that many human beings know very well and that often accompanies them throughout their lives. Sometimes thoughts arise that make people wonder whether they were born at the wrong time, in the wrong culture, or in the wrong family, or whether they are living in the wrong environment. These are thoughts that deeply unsettle people, torment them, and affect their entire emotional world and psyche, which can lead to such massive feelings of loneliness that they begin to think about suicide or murder and, in the worst cases, also commit suicide or murder if they blame other human beings for their loneliness and don't realize that they themselves need to move. The destructive power that human beings build up when they do not face their own inner demons and their own faults is enormous. And it is always a sign of cowardice towards themselves, because the seemingly easy way is favored, and confrontation with oneself and one's own faults and shortcomings is snivelingly avoided. Not every human being is lucky enough to be born into the right family, where they are cared for, understood, and guided, and educated within the correct framework as a child. The more overpopulation grows, the less such a naturally happy constellation is to be expected, and the more human beings struggle with feelings of loneliness. Feeling misunderstood, being rejected and misunderstood, and being a stranger. If human beings cannot get to grips with them, such feelings can trigger aggression and hatred, or also self-hatred and Gevald, and lead to rebellion against everything and everyone, as can be seen with horror in some of today's adolescents. People who suffer from inner loneliness should look for and build an inner home for themselves, which they can find with foreign but like-minded human beings, with whom they can build an inner bond, because they can feel understood and accepted by them, and where they are recognized as human beings and accepted for who they really are. If they succeed in doing this, and if they also look for a life's work to which they can fully commit themselves, and which gives them the certainty that they are dedicating themselves to something meaningful, then the thoughts and feelings of inner loneliness will gradually subside until they disappear completely after a while. Yes, in addition, the human being consciously and creatively dedicates himself to a task that suits him and in which he can pursue his inclinations and live out his interests, then he also succeeds in building something for himself that belongs only to him, and he learns to feel secure in this self-chosen new life and to recognize himself as part of a greater whole, which reduces his burdens, and he begins to create order in his own life, to eliminate any chaos, and to control his own destiny step by step. He inevitably realizes that he is part of a greater whole and that he has his rightful place in it, which he only has to shape and make his own. The inner loneliness evaporates and begins to dissolve at the point in time when the human being takes his life into his own hands and looks for his own place and begins to fill it.